It was good, y'all. It's your boy JD6 here. I'm with my man. Shout out to KC Sports Authority. Make sure y'all go check that podcast out, man.
You heard the man. Welcome into another episode of the KC Sports Authority podcast. I am Keegan Russell, and if you're finding us over here on YouTube today, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button below. We would greatly appreciate that. If you're listening to us on Spotify on the go, make sure you give us a follow there as well. You can give us a 5-star review on the podcast. You can hit us up any of our social medias at KCSA Pod below: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And today I'm joined by Jack Johnson, host of the Locked On Royals podcast, to talk a little Royals offseason. You know, baseball is in the midst of the playoffs, but for the Royals, it is officially offseason for them. And the big question into the offseason is, of course, how do we revamp, retool, strengthen this 1 through 9 lineup offensively, because we can see the building block pieces for a deep postseason run, and the offense just kind of came up short. So that's what we're going to be talking in this one. So Jack, thanks for joining me again. Always appreciate you having you on. Let's start with the playoffs, though. Just any quick thoughts on some of the series? Have the late 15 inner baseball? I mean, to me, I know a lot of fans are like, gosh, this is dragging on. Where's the extra inning rule going into effect? But 15 innings of baseball, I thought was a lot of fun to watch. But just thoughts on the postseason run. Like, for me, I thought Phillies disappointment. You know, they were my favorite pick all year for the World Series, and fell up short. But what have you thought of the playoffs so far?
Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me on. Always a blast when I get to talk some Royals baseball with you guys. And then to pivot a little bit about this postseason, I mean, I'm right there with you, man. I had the Phillies getting to the World Series. I had them winning the World Series. I was concerned about the Dodgers bullpen. I wasn't as high on the Cubs. I thought the Brewers could make it to the NLCS. But really on that side, you know, I feel that Chiefs fans can relate a little bit to what the Dodgers are going through, where, you know, after you win it, a lot of people would say, well, I'm going to take the field, right? I'm not going to expect them to win back-to-back years. I'm taking the field. It just seems likelier for that to happen than a repeat winner. And so maybe doubting the Los Angeles Dodgers was the dumbest thing we could have done, because at the end of the day, they still have multiple MVPs on that team. They have an elite rotation when they're healthy. And now they've got a guy in the bullpen like Rogi Sasaki, who wasn't good all season long, just turning it up to a whole different level to become a weapon in that bullpen. So as much as I would like to see Milwaukee get to the World Series, I have a hard time believing that they're going to beat the Dodgers. I'm just done betting against the Dodgers. It feels like it's a dumb thing to do at this point. And then on the American League side, yeah, I mean, if you have any friends that are Tigers fans, I mean, that's about as crushing of a series as you could have. I mean, I don't know if it's more crushing to blow that huge lead they had in the Central, because even though, Keegan, we saw the Tigers get past Cleveland, what wasn't really brought up after they beat Cleveland was, well, if they held on to that lead and they continued to play good baseball, they probably were going to get the 1 seed on the American League side. When did that factor in? Oh, just when they played Seattle, and Game 5 had to be in Seattle instead of Detroit. So that has to be so crushing for them. They were so impressive for 90% of the season, had a great series win against Cleveland, but to lose 2 of those 5 games with Tarek Skubal on the bump, you just can't comprehend it. Baseball remains the most unpredictable sport on planet Earth.
Yeah, and I don't think it's any coincidence that the 4 hottest teams in baseball coming down the stretch are the 4 teams remaining. I mean, Seattle, what they did post-trade deadline, taking over the West to clinch it, was incredible. Toronto has just been clobbering left and right. Really took apart the Yankees in that series. But yeah, it's been fun. But I think the takeaway I've had so far is you can have great pitching, you can have great defense, but if you don't have guys that can get runs in, you're not going to go deep. And I think we're seeing that with what Toronto's lineup is capable of, what Seattle, buying a bunch of power at the deadline and strengthening their lineup. So obviously big need for the Royals. I mean, I think we can all agree that's probably the number one most important talking point in this offseason is how do we deepen the offensive lineup? We feel pretty good about the pitching rotation. Good chance somebody gets moved in an offseason trade. I know you'll be talking about that all offseason too. But definitely need to deepen this lineup. So I want to start here with, if you kind of had to rank priorities, what would you say the number one offseason priority is for improving the offense?
It's going to have to be a corner outfield bat. And I sound like a broken record because that's been nearly a top 3 priority for this organization the last 3 seasons. I mean, it's great to have the pitching depth, but I'm not sure they've ever gone into an offseason under JJ Picollo with this much depth, where I don't believe you need to spend a dime on any starting pitching. You've got an abundance of arms you could turn to, and some of those guys that won't crack the rotation, you just stash them in the bullpen if they're out of options, or if you just want to see them be that 1 to 2 inning guy that really avoided that bullpen all season long. I did think that the Royals lacked that true long reliever, which just can give that back end of the bullpen some relief, where we saw all those injuries and guys that were burned out at the end of the year because you had to throw a lot more innings than you were used to. But circling back to what they need, I mean, the free agent pool is not a perfect fit for the Royals. I get a growing sense that a trade is far more likely just because we know with JJ Picollo, we know with the guys in the front office, they're not going to spend money on a guy just to say, hey, we at least tried and spent money. They're going to be looking for the right fits. And I feel a perfect example is what they did at the trade deadline. Nobody, including myself, was saying, man, they should target Ryan Bergert and Stephen Colin. Like, we didn't even have them on the radar because those were guys with multiple years of control. So if you're the Royals, I'd probably say it's likelier they are looking at a few options out there. Not saying they're ruling out anybody in free agency, but to go the trade route and find a young, controllable piece that is affordable, won't cost you your number 1 and number 2 prospect, but can make a difference. Because that will be, in my opinion, what separates the last couple of off seasons with this one. The last 2 years, you said, well, we still have Hunter Renfroe. Well, we still have MJ Melendez, and he's changed his stance and this and that. Those times are done. There is no Hunter Renfroe anymore. There is no MJ Melendez anymore. And I feel that going after a legitimate left fielder, because Jack Caglione just, I feel he's going to be their right fielder on opening day. Left field is where I'd be a little bit more concerned about, or what I would be looking toward, because even though Cag struggled, you're not giving up on him after 1 season. So I'd imagine he's going to be out there. Maybe Mike Yastrzemski's a guy you bring back to give Caglione maybe some relief that he doesn't have to be the everyday right fielder. But in left field, that's where I've circled it. And you got to find somebody that's not just a good bat. You need to have somebody that can move the needle, because this lineup needs to have about 5 to 6 above average bats if they expect to be in the middle of the group.
Yeah, and I know you've said it several times over the last few weeks. We've heard JJ said it. Heck, I think even John Sherman said it in his press conference a couple of days ago that, we're past the point of hoping some of these guys figure it out and provide what we need. It's time we got to go get what we legitimately need, like you said, and someone that you can trust to go get the job done. So, if you had to put the odds on it with the way Q puts together lineups, studying the analytics, is it more likely, as you look across the free agency landscape, like you said, it's not a deep class of free agents, but there are some quality ones out there, but guys you just don't feel like they're like Kyle Tucker. Ain't no chance John Sherman's writing that check. I would be shocked if he would even write the check for a Kyle Schwarber, 15 to 18 million per year for the next 3 or 4 years. I would be shocked if he did that, because that's probably still less than what Schwarber could get on the open market. So a lot of those big power bat options in the outfield probably aren't going to be available, realistically speaking. Is it more likely that they go, you think, the platoon route in both corner outfields than it is to find a surefire everyday starter?
One of my gripes of this team last year was not so much of they went into opening day with Cavan Biggio at first and Hunter Renfroe, Melendez out there. My biggest gripe all season long was the depth was just not good whatsoever. And I like a lot of the guys. I've interviewed a couple of the guys that were bench players for this team, and I wish them nothing but the best. But if you look at some of these teams that are in the postseason race, they don't have 3 to 4 sub 200 hitters coming off the bench. And when it comes to Matt Quatraro, he wants to have those platoon lineups. That's just, and for people that don't like it, I just go look at the way Kevin Cash manages the Tampa Bay Rays. That's, of course, where Matt Quatraro comes from. The Rays are very righty-lefty oriented. They have a bunch of guys that they can play in multiple positions, and they want to get those advantages. In a perfect world, the Royals want to be able to have that raised depth where there's a lot of guys that they don't have to overpay for, and you can still put together a really solid roster. So if you're JJ Piccolo, what's more likely, right? That you go out there and say, well, Kyle Schwarber can't play anywhere other than DH. He would be their worst outfielder. And keep in mind, you have a first baseman in right field. So that doesn't feel likely to just say, well, Kyle Schwarber can play left. No, he'd have to be a DH and a DH only. And so throwing the money at a guy like that, I wouldn't rule it out, because I do feel that if JJ were to ever go to John Sherman and say, we need the money for this guy, I really feel he can make the difference in the lineup. I believe John Sherman gives him the money. It's basically what happened with Carlos Estevez. It was, we really need this guy for our bullpen. He said, let's do it then. I'm going to give you the money to go get that player. But for how the Royals can be successful and more well-rounded, adding a couple guys to that bench that really are platoon bats and not just, well, Nick Lofton's hitting 185, but he is a righty, and we want him in there over Mike Yastrzemski, or we want him in there over another left-handed bat. That's not really doing what you're supposed to. You need to have guys coming off the bench like a Rob Refsnyder in Boston that only played against lefties and crushed it. I mean, he would just dominate left-handed pitching. And when a righty was up, he's out of the game. And that's why, like Mike Yastrzemski and Rob Refsnyder, I can't get that pairing out of my head. Now, Rob Refsnyder is not that, perfect right fielder. You'd want to have somebody like Yaz where they could both play a corner outfield spot, and that would be fine. But that's what I would say is what a platoon lineup should look like. I want somebody that can hit 290 with an OPS plus 30 points above league average against righties, and you got a carbon copy from a right-handed hitter when facing lefties.
I like that he's the first name you mentioned, because that was the pairing I kept coming back to as, I wouldn't say the perfect platoon back and forth, but the closest thing possible of righty-lefty split in the outfield. Refsnyder, he's been solid for several years now. I know it's been years, but used to play a little bit of infield. But I like that combo a lot. And that's why, to me, as I look around free agency, look around the trade options, there's not that many teams anymore that have the surefire everyday left fielder, everyday right fielder. The big powerhouses, of course, have some of those, but you're seeing a lot more of these mix and match matchups. The guys that can play second, can play third, play a corner outfield. Like you mentioned, Brendan Donovan last week. It kind of feels like that's the direction we're headed a little bit. So talking about the lineup here, we know obvious holes: corner outfield, left, right, maybe a little bit of second. Where are you right now when it comes to Jonathan India, Michael Massey, and the direction you would go at second base?
Yeah, you just look at the contract that Jonathan India will have next season. If you do choose to keep him on, he's making close to $10 million. If I'm not mistaken, it's like 9.5 to 10.5. It's somewhere in that wheelhouse, I want to say. But the only argument the Royals could have to keeping Jonathan India is, well, he played through last season really banged up. Like, he just never was able to fully get healthy. We had him at third. We had him in left. He's a second baseman. And I have no doubt in my mind that his struggles at second base were a direct correlation to him having to play left, having to play third, not really getting into a rhythm, not really getting in sync. I don't believe he's that poor of a defender. But the offensive numbers is what I look at. Why did Jonathan India go from a top 5 walk rate in baseball to then having his worst career year when it comes to getting on base through the walk? A low slug, a lower on base, a low batting average. I just look at what the value could be at second base and say, if you're fine with that, you got to be able to hit on a player like him, right? Because if we're going to roll the dice with Jack Caglione, I've been talking about bounce back players. I don't want 4 bounce back guys in the lineup, because odds are going to tell you maybe one of those guys does bounce back. The rest of them, not so much. And at second base, Adam Frazier was the most consistent. Michael Massey caught fire at the end of the year, though I'm always concerned about Michael Massey's back. Like, that is something that can.
Once you have a back problem, you always have a back problem.
Exactly. And so I remember him, I interviewed him 2 years ago in spring training, maybe it was just last year. And he said, it's just something that he deals with. It probably will never go away as long as he's playing, but you're hoping you can just keep it calmed down enough and the numbers can be there. But other than Adam Frazier, the numbers just weren't there at second base for the Royals. And I go back and wonder, what if they didn't go after Jonathan India and got Gleyber Torres?
Sure.
That's probably one of the better infields in all of baseball.
Which they could do again this offseason.
Yeah, and so that's where I wonder if the Royals, if they have a lot of money to spend and they want to add, you look at someone like a Gleyber Torres. I know not a lot of people are fans of Luis Ariz because Luis Ariz is a singles hitter and, he's just not as fun to watch. But based off what they got at second base, which was some pretty awful production until Adam Frazier got there, it's something you do need to consider. It's still probably down the list a little bit because they have a couple of second basemen, but it's something I would want them to think about because there are options out there.
Well, and I know I told you I wasn't going to try and throw many names at you, but just because we're on the topic of second, to me, that's the one I come back to that I think has the most variety of options.
Yeah.
To put there. I think that the outfield, just, man, you look around baseball, there's just not that many left field, right field guys that, one, are available to trade for yet, two, free agent that feels like the right fit. So it just feels like you're going to end up, whatever we go do from the fan base, they might be disappointed. So I look at second. First off, I think I'd probably rule out, I don't think I see any scenario where Maikel Garcia moves back to second because they find the right third baseman. That doesn't feel likely either. So looking at second base, some of it might depend on how this Mariners series goes. But what do you think of like Dylan Moore or Jorge Polanco being that second, third, a little bit of versatility? I know Moore can play a little bit of the outfield, but a guy like that who could probably play 4 or 5 days a week and then maybe platoon with somebody else at another spot.
It'll tell me a lot about JJ Picollo and this front office if they were to go out there and make a splash with a Jorge Polanco, a Gleyber Torres, or a Luis Ariz. Reason being, how many times in your fandom, Keegan, have you seen the Royals have multiple guys at one position and they go, I don't care. We need to upgrade that position. We need to get better at that position. It's easy, right? It was easy in 2023 to look at the Royals starting rotation and go, let's scrap it. We don't have anybody coming back other than Cole Reagans and Brady Singer. Let's go get Waka. Let's go get Lugo. Let's develop Alec Marsh. Let's go get some bullpen help. It's easy to go after guys and sign, positions of need. But when you really can separate yourself into we are going to be far more competitive this year, it's moves like that. I would be all for Jorge Polanco. I'd be for Brendan Donovan at second base. Because what the Royals of the past would do is say, Jonathan India wasn't great this year, but he was hurt, and we're going to run it back.
Yeah.
And that's just – it's a dangerous game if he starts out the year not playing well because you missed your opportunity to go out there and add some pieces. But I would be floored if they were to say none of those second basemen they had on the roster at the end of the year are coming back and we're just going to move forward with a different guy. It would show you that JJ Picollo really means business is off season. But I do know that it just feels lower down on the priority list. It's got to be all this focused on the outfield first and then probably the bench right after that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it feels more likely that they're going to make these, I wouldn't say smaller moves, but they're going to go for a quantity of options versus, all right, we're throwing 18 mil per year at one guy. Because again, that guy just doesn't feel like he exists. Maybe again, Cedric Mullins in a bounce back type year, you bring him in center field, move on from Kyle Isbell or move Kyle Isbell to your fourth or whatever the case may be. It just feels like that seems the much more likely scenario because I'm looking at the payroll. And Sherman didn't talk that much. He said, he'll add to the payroll when it's necessary, but they also understand they got to, stay within reason. They don't want to just spend money to spend money. But, Salvi's going to be making 20 mil. Bobby Witt's contract extension kicks in. You got Waka, you got Lugo still. So you've still got, 70-ish million tied up in 4 or 5 of your big name players. You'll have decisions to make with Chris Bubich this offseason. What kind of a raise does he potentially get, whether it's arbitration or, an extension. And the Royals aren't going to be the team that goes, oh, right, I don't think that they're going to go, hey, here's 3 for 72 to free agent option A. So you've got, let's say 25, 30 million there to play with. Would you go after those 4 or 5 smaller platoons type guys where it gives you, Vinny Bobby, and Michael are going to be your 1 through 3. And I'm going to assume in this scenario that unless guy A is available, Garcia's your opening day starting leadoff hitter, Bobby the 2-hole, and then Vinny at the 3-hole, Salvi somewhere 4, 5, 6. Like that's pretty much a given at this point. To me, it just feels like the lineup's going to be the outside of those 4. You're going to have 3 other guys flip flopping all night, unless you feel like a Carter Jensen just goes into the off season just mashing the ball. You feel confident as a true, a rookie next year can be a 4 to 5 time a week catcher DH option, or Cags, really takes off and becomes that 5th bat in the lineup. But how do you see the rest of this lineup kind of coming together? Where would you shift your focus?
Yeah, I mean, the exciting part about it is I feel the Royals really like what they have in Carter Jensen. I mean, I was, dumbfounded when he got called up in September. I didn't see it being likely because he was tearing it up in Omaha. You go finish out the year there, and then you go into the offseason, you come back to spring training, can't compete for a spot, but they've always had confidence in him. And the fact that he was able to finish the year the way he did, I mean, we saw the type of power that he possesses, having a home run in Sacramento that went almost 500 feet. He's good behind the plate. I only see him getting better. That's why I would view this as a lineup right off the bat where maybe Carter Jensen is an everyday player. I mean, Salvador Perez is not getting any younger, and I'm not sure they're going to be all right with a $20 million, 36, 37-year-old guy that's only DHing.
Yeah.
They're going to want Salvi to still catch a little bit, but you want him off his feet as much as possible. And if Carter Jensen can be this hitter they expect him to be, you can almost count that as an offseason acquisition because of what he can bring to the table. Jack Caglione figuring things out. That would be huge for this lineup. And so there's to me, like that's the 5 or 6 that you would have with Michael at third, Bobby at short, Vinny at first, Salvi, and then Carter and Jack. There's your 6. And then figure out what you want to do in center field. If Kyle Isbell's the guy you want to roll with again, which I don't really have any inkling that they're going to move on from him.
Yeah.
He's coming off a career year. He plays good defense in center. I feel it's one of those things where even though people are going to like me saying this, they don't want to just, take for granted how good of a defender that he is. And if he hits 265, that's probably fine because the center field market, other than Harrison Bader, who's coming off of a huge year, don't know what type of money he's looking for. Maybe that's riskier than just running it back with Kyle Isbell and then putting the chips in on a left fielder. And that's why, to your question about, spending a little bit here and there, smaller moves, I'm okay with that if they make a big trade for their left fielder.
Sure.
If they don't do that, you got to spend the money to get the left fielder because this cannot be let's just try to fix our massive outfield problem with 3 platoon guys. No, I want the platoon guys, but you still need to have that guy you can count on in the middle of that lineup because you see Detroit, Seattle, the Yankees, the Red Sox, there's really not a lot of let up in that lineup. And when you're facing the Royals, you get past the first 4, there was a ton of let up in that lineup where opposing pitchers just weren't that scared to make mistakes to those guys.
Yeah, and I think that's why you saw, fan base at times go, man, Kyle Isbell's our best option for center field. Well, yeah, when you got 2 corner outfielders not producing much at a bat, if Kyle Isbell has a rough week, you're going, why is this the guy we're throwing out there? But yeah, to your point, he's one of the 3 best center fielders defensively speaking. He had a few base running mishaps this year, but all in all, you would take his production as an everyday center fielder over most guys. And that corner outfield, I mean, that's going to be the biggest question all offseason long. Who is that guy you're targeting? So the only name I was going to throw at you is a potential lineup scenario. Let's say Royals strike out on a lot of these smaller opportunities, but for some reason they go out there and they swing the trade for a Joe Adell. You pencil him in as your 4-hole hitter, Salvi behind him. Is a bat like that enough to push the Royals over the top?
I mean, if you could get Joe Adell and just duplicate what he did this past season, I mean, that does tremendous things for the lineup. Here would be the hangup and what I am looking for now with the Angels. The Angels, which it suits them right. They kind of went in at the deadline, but they didn't do enough, and they believed in themselves. They just said they're not trading any of their guys with a value, and they finished dead last in the division. Like, to me, this is what we knew all along with the Angels, and they held on to some of these guys where they could jumpstart their rebuild, but they don't want to admit that they've failed, and they feel they're much closer than they really are. Now they're going to have a first-year manager again. Looks like it could be Albert Pujols. What do you want to do with a first-year manager? Do you want to move some of these younger pieces and try to give them a young group to work with? Or do you say, hey, the only way we convince this guy to come here is if we're going to try to win right off the bat? So that makes me question Joe Adell and Taylor Ward. Because now Taylor Ward, who has been a Royals favorite for like 2.5 years, he's now going to be a free agent after this next season. So the value has gone down and down and down. And that's why I look at two of these guys. Joe Adell would be somebody, knowing what they were asking for Taylor Ward in these type of deals of, the prospects the Royals had. They just weren't willing to give up all of that for Taylor Ward. With Joe Adell, I could see it being the same type of deal where young player coming off a career year, we want your top 3 prospects for a guy like Joe Adell. And for the Royals, it's either you believe what Joe Adell just did last year is the beginning of something special, or it was a one-off. And so maybe do you pivot and say, after all these years going after Taylor Ward, he's a guy who, yes, is nearing his age 32, 33 season, but coming off a 30-plus home run year, maybe the price is down, and this is the perfect time for the Angels to move him, and you can get that middle-of-the-order bat. I would love Joe Adell. I feel that would do a lot for that lineup, but the Angels are tough to negotiate with, it seems like, and I feel for Joe Adell, that price would be astronomically high.
Yeah, the Angels, they're an odd one because they are like the perfect example of middling team. Like, they remind me of the Jeff Fisher St. Louis Rams.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you always know they're going to be around 500. They're never going to make a big trade to put them over the top. They're not going to get rid of anybody. They're just going to play average sport and hope that their guys develop. And the Angels, yeah, you look at this would be a prime offseason to rediscover their identity. You've got an aging Mike Trout who just can't stay healthy, but you're paying him $35 million a year for another 4 or 5 years. You still got Anthony Rendon on the books, and I don't think he's seen an MLB ball field in 3 years now.
Oh, wow.
And they haven't got rid of him, so that money's still in the books. Like, are they willing to finally realize they are who they are? And whether it's retooling around with Joe Adell and being that centerpiece and moving on from Taylor Ward, like, what are they going to do? They feel like they feel like where the Athletics were a couple of years ago, where they were the team you called for all their potential talent because they knew they weren't going anywhere yet. And now, of course, the Athletics, that talent, they've been able to trade a lot of those guys, bring in a bunch of young prospects, and now they're putting together quite the core to develop. But yeah, the Angels would be an interesting one. But yeah, just the offseason as a whole, there's going to be a lot of moving pieces. I feel much better on the trade front, like you mentioned too, that there are some potential guys out there to get creative with. But two last things for you. One, I don't see them going this route because it would be different from what we've seen in the past. But traditionally, backup catcher, Freddie Fermin gone. Outside of a Freddie Fermin guy, the Royals really haven't spent much assets or resources in a legitimate backup catch. We've had guys that are perfectly serviceable, but nobody that really excites you, that if Salvi had to miss 3 to 6 months, that you're going, all right, we can count on him. A guy I've had circled for about a year now, I don't know if he really quite fits the mold of what we would need from a backup catcher, but is there any scenario, because of the raw power, that JJ could look at a guy like a Gary Sanchez, play him 3-4 games a week, let Salvi DH, let Salvi play first and Vinny DH a little bit, just to get that bat in the lineup and have him be your backup, maybe as well as having Carter on the bench too?
Well, if it wasn't for Carter's emergence in September, I absolutely think it would be something they were going to look into. But I almost feel now they view Carter as that guy of we're going to play him 3 to 4 times a week. And, Salvi and Carter could be in the lineup at the same time. And the goal might be, if they were to choose this route, which I don't think they would need to until late in the year, instead of replacing the Freddie Fermin role, which I believe will be filled by Carter Jensen, it might be more of we need to replace the Luke Maile role. If we want to carry 3 catchers on the roster, right, and we want to have somebody who might just play once a week, if that, just to have some extra depth over there, because Salvi is going to be, 35, 36, 37, whatever it would be. you could look to add that type of player. Maybe that would be Gary Sanchez, but I'm more so for if you're going to have 2 catchers already on the roster and you want to have a third, maybe wait till after the deadline, because that's when guys are really, wearing down a bit and they have that fatigue setting in.
And then last one for you, who's that guy or a couple of guys right now that nothing's happened, no moves are imminent, there's no rumors out there talking about it just yet, but who's that 1 or 2 guys out there that just feel like they're going to be wearing a Kansas City Royals uniform going into next year?
It's a great question, and I already brought him up on one of my podcasts earlier, and this is more so about I think he's a perfect Royal because I'm surprised that he hasn't been targeted in previous years. It would be Harrison Bader. And the reason I would say Harrison Bader, he's coming off the year in Philadelphia, Minnesota and Philadelphia, I should say. He is elite defensively. We know how much the Royals value that. And maybe you could have a situation where you bring in Harrison Bader. I don't know what the price would be, but maybe that's your platoon in center. Mm-hmm. Kyle Isbell was already platooning a bunch this year, but one of their hangups, I'd imagine, of wanting to platoon all the time was that they didn't have somebody as good defensively to put out there when Isbell wasn't out there, right? You could try things with Tyler Tolbert or Mike Yastrzemski. If the Royals could have 2 center fielders like that, and who knows, maybe, Bader could play some left as well and right, and you have that type of defense, that's valuable at Kauffman Stadium. And I was surprised last year, coming off the year that he did, the Royals didn't try to give him that 1-year deal that Minnesota did. But I truthfully feel that he figured something out. I feel that they tweaked something with his swing, because you don't just go from as bad of a hitter as he was for the Mets and then to have a year like he did between Minnesota and Philadelphia. If you want to upgrade over Kyle Isbell, if you want to give him that platoon bat in center, he just screams Royal to me. The guy that is so elite defensively but has a little bit more pop than Isbell, I feel that's in the price range, and it would not surprise me whatsoever if we see, closer to winter meetings, like here are the teams interested in Harrison Bader, or we see those ESPN articles of here are the 3 fits for Harrison Bader, and the Royals are that team that constantly come up.
Yeah, I felt like he was one we would have been in on at the trade deadline too, just given that defensive ability. I mean, he can cover a lot of ground, and the Royals have always been about, whether you're playing center field or not, even if you're in left field, if you can cover that much space and do it at an elite level, there's a place for you. Okay, last thing for you, 1 through 9 lineup scenario here. Royals struggle in the offseason. The options just aren't there. The trade scenarios just don't quite come through yet. So this is your potential opening day lineup. Tell me your thoughts on how deep this team goes. The usual: Garcia, Witt, Vinny. For this scenario, I've got Salvi as your catcher DH in the 4-hole. Your Yaz comes back, and Cags split platoon in right field. Left field is again another platoon of Adam Frazier, Yaz, Cags, one of these other guys on here. Massey, Frazier platoon at second. Carter Jensen on the mostly everyday lineup, being your backup catcher, everyday catcher, whatever, DH. And then Kyle Isbell in the everyday 9 spot. So really no additions other than what we currently have. You just bring back Mike Yastrzemski and Adam Frazier. What does that lineup do?
I don't know if it does enough for me. I feel it's a lineup that could be better out of the gates than last year's group was, just because I don't see any of those guys hitting under 100 like MJ Melendez did, or under 120 like Hunter Renfroe did. But to me, with them missing the postseason this year, and the goal, of course, was to win the division, I'm not sure you can be satisfied saying, well, we didn't really get what we wanted, but we'll just do this group. If they don't hit it through the trade route, I do see them spending money to go get guys that are bigger fish than Mike Yastrzemski or Adam Frazier. And I think those guys are totally fine as bench pieces or platoon bats, but you need somebody that you have not been able to acquire in the last 2 years. You need to have that middle of the order bat to protect Salvi, to protect Jack Caglione. And whether that be free agency or whether that be trade, you got to get it done in some way, shape, or form. But I just don't know if that lineup is good enough to top Detroit or even top Cleveland, because we know that Cleveland really is never going to die. Cleveland's always going to be a team that finds a way to to rally late and find a way to either A, win that division, or just B, get a wild card spot.
Yeah, it almost doesn't matter the name on the back of that jersey for Cleveland.
Exactly.
As long as Ramirez is in the lineup, they find a way to get enough done when it matters most. But yeah, we'll wrap up there. Obviously, we'll talk some more offseason throughout the next several weeks and months. And I know, other Royals fans are going to be tuned into Locked On Royals to not just hear all the guys you have that'll be coming up for trade targets and free agency, but I'm a nerd when it comes to the offseason roster construction. I love it. I love breaking down scenarios, and I'm sure we'll have some more throughout. So appreciate you hopping on with me. Of course, go check out Locked On Royals, which I'm sure anyone who's watching this episode probably already does. But yeah, we appreciate it. Those of you that are here, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button below for more Royals offseason content, Chiefs talk, KU football, KU basketball. We've got it all for you here. Got big KU basketball preseason episode later this week, so make sure you come back and check that out. But that'll wrap it up on this one. We will catch you guys in the next episode.